Hello and welcome to a special actor-centric episode of Movies You Missed podcast.
Nice.
I'm Vee.
And I'm John.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. This week we are focusing on movies that star both Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz.
Hell yeah, Tom Cruise, Cameron Diaz. Can't wait to discuss these flicks.
And it seems like you can't go wrong with them either.
That's also true.
So I'm really excited to get into this. How you doing today, John?
Pretty good. Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well. I really liked how different both of these movies are. We don't do it very often. A lot of times, actually most of the time, our themes are really focused on a genre of movie.
Yeah.
Or a topic in a movie. But this week I picked an action comedy and yours is the complete opposite. It's a psychological thriller.
Hell yeah.
And I know you and I actually watch our movies in the same order every week, so we always watch my movie first and your movie last. And we'll get into it, but I'm really glad I watched my movie first this week.
You know what's interesting is that I didn't know that that's how you actually watched the movies until several months ago, and it kind of was like, oh, because I thought you would watch my movie first and your movie last, but hey, you know, it is what it is. So it worked out for us this week, especially with the order of movies, because I agree with you. I think your pick was a nice way to segue into my pick this week.
And like I said, we'll get into that, but for those of you who have joined us before, you know we love to discuss the new movies we've seen in theaters or on streaming this week.
One of my favorite bits of Movies You Missed podcast.
Same, and that should now be our intro music for this part of the podcast moving forward, because that was adorable.
All right.
John, did you see anything new this week?
You know I did. I went and saw James McAvoy in Speak No Evil.
I'm so excited to hear your review of this movie.
You know, I'm going to be honest. I've seen the movie because there were two separate trailers that came out over the summer and showed you just about everything.
Oh, bummer.
I was very, very disappointed. And, you know, I think I even told you a few times that I left the theater because there was another Speak No Evil trailer.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to see it all. They don't show you some of the more bloody moments of the movie, but overall, I gave it a C+, only because I literally have seen the movie already. James McAvoy was awesome. The cast was all really good. I thought it was shot well. I thought it was actually a very well put together movie. Just the marketing was shoving it all in your face way too much to get you to the theater, and that's literally why I lost interest in Alien Romulus, because of the amount of trailers that I saw that showed so much different stuff.
So there isn't some big twist in this movie that you're like, oh, cool.
There is, but it's, you know,
It's not big enough?
Yeah, it's really not big enough. I think you kind of pick up on it about like 45 minutes into the movie. It's just short of 2 hours. It's enjoyable. I'm not going to try and dissuade anybody from seeing it because it is worth seeing, especially if all you have seen is a poster. Like if you have not seen a trailer for this movie, go see Speak No Evil. But if you've seen the trailers for the movie, you've pretty much seen the movie.
Bummer.
Yeah. But again, it was a good time at the movies. The audience seemed to like it. It was pretty packed. I went Monday afternoon around 1 o'clock. So, you know, it's selling tickets, and this was the first 4 days of its release. So I think it'll do pretty well. It is a little early for Halloween-esque type horror movies, but also we got Long Legs and Cuckoo mid-year. So, you know, it's worth seeing. But again, I said what I said.
Okay. Yeah, trailers showing the whole entire plot of the movie is so disappointing.
Yeah, very much so. So I think what I'm going to start adopting with going to the movies is I'll get there around when it's supposed to start, because there's 15 minutes of commercials and then the 20 of trailers. And I'm just going to kind of linger and not watch any more trailers for any more movies, because I'm just sick and tired of being underwhelmed with the movie theater experience.
I get that. I love watching trailers, but giving away the whole plot that has been the trend for the last 15 years, more and more and more and more. It's really frustrating.
Very much so, yeah. I don't want to see the whole thing in 2 minutes. I want to actually go to the theater and spend 2 hours with the story.
Yeah.
Which is, again, a great reason why I went and saw Slingshot. I knew nothing about it, and it was one of the best movies of the year.
Another argument for independent movies that don't have a ton of marketing.
Exactly.
As most of you know, John and I both love that section of our podcast. We hope you do too. Maybe it'll steer you towards some new movies that you really enjoy. If not, at least you have the 2 movies we pick every week to fall back on, because, John, I believe you go first this week.
Ah, yes, I do go first. Unfortunately, V, you do not, so it's going to be an interesting segue into your pick this week.
It is, because we watched them in opposite order. However, we could argue that it's a good palate cleanser at the end.
That's true, and chronologically it works too.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's get into it then. Without further ado, I chose a movie, if you were following along last week, a movie from 2001, written and directed by Cameron Crowe, starring Tom Cruise, Cameron Diaz, Penelope Cruz, Jason Lee, Kurt Russell, Noah Taylor, Alicia Witt, and Tilda Swinton. This film is titled Vanilla Sky. This film is actually a reimagining of a film called Abre los Ojos, written and directed by Alejandro Amenabar. Now, V, we discussed him last October because he wrote and directed The Others.
Yes, he did. Oh, I love that movie so much. I'm so glad we were able to talk about it last October.
Me too. Great movie and great writer. I still have yet to actually see the original of this film, but I'm sure I will get to it at some point.
Yeah, we should watch that.
So please forgive us, audience, because neither V or I watched the original before seeing Vanilla Sky. I'm going to do my best to break this movie down, because here at Movies You Miss Podcast, you all know we do not do spoilers, and this is one of those films that it's going to be difficult not to spoil this film.
Yes, I've been thinking about it since I watched this film for this week, and I was actually really grateful that it wasn't my pick.
Oh, yeah. It's a very intricate story, so I'm just going to do my best to break it down as quickly and easily as possible. This film is centered on a man named David Ames, played by Tom Cruise. He is a bit of an immature playboy. He's inherited his father's magazine company after his father died. He's got 51% control, and he's doing his best to keep the board of this company pretty much out of his hair. They, of course, feel that they should have gotten the 51% because they've been there since the beginning. But hey, you know, when the father dies, a lot of times it is passed on down to the son, and that is what has happened in this situation. David Ames, he's also a little bit spoiled. I mean, he's got the money, you know, why not spoil yourself, right? It's not like his dad's spoiling him anymore.
No, but he seems like, you know, the classic rich douche. He uses people and he just doesn't seem like a guy you'd actually want to be friends with, because you really can't be friends with a guy like that.
I know, yeah, it would be interesting to be friends with somebody with this kind of a lifestyle. He's also been stringing along this very beautiful singer-actress named Julie Gianni, played terrifyingly by Cameron Diaz.
It's a good description.
Very much so. She's really freaky right from the beginning, because I've never seen Cameron Diaz in a role like this. She's always been in comedies, right? Mm-hmm. She hasn't actually done a whole lot of thrillers or psychological mind benders. And she plays Julie Gianni wonderfully. I thought that she was the perfect casting for this role.
She channeled Glenn Close a bit from Fatal Attraction.
Oh, yeah. That's a good description. Yeah, very much a Fatal Attraction sort of situation brewing between David and Julie. Moving forward in the story, it's David's birthday, and Julie shows up at his birthday, but she wasn't invited. So David's a little bit irked about this. His best friend Brian shows up, who's played by Jason Lee, fantastically also. And he brings along Sophia, who's played by Penelope Cruz. And immediately David and Sophia are drawn to each other. They start to, you can see the chemistry building just on the first meetup. And I really liked the whole breakdown of how, you know, they end up hanging out at his birthday. And Brian is already given David shit because he brought Sophia to the party and he was hoping to, you know, actually date Sophia, but Sophia's now into David. You know, there's a little bit of a love triangle. And also Brian's been jealous of David because David's been stringing along Julie Gianni. After Sophia and David end up at Sophia's apartment, David ends up walking her home, and they have a wonderful evening together. I love that whole sequence between them both. I love that they're watching TV, and I love that they are drawing each other's shortcomings, and the caricature that she draws of him is hysterical.
Yeah.
And it actually looks very much like Tom Cruise or, you know, David Ames with all the girls under, you know, his big chin and his smile.
I really love that scene because there are people that you've met in your life that you stay up till 2 a.m. talking to them on the phone, or you go out to dinner and then you just spend the rest of the night with them, and they just talked. And I really liked that it was this intimate night without any physical contact. You know, it's just them talking and getting to know each other. And those are some of the best encounters you can have with another person, right? When you just never run out of stuff to talk about and you're just absolutely immersed in getting to know this person.
Exactly, yeah. And we, again, you know, it kind of goes back to what I just said about David, a little bit more integrity, a little bit more maturity, you know, not just like, oh, I'm going to get in her pants right away.
Right.
He wants to get to know this woman. Like, you know, he's looking at pictures on her fridge and, well, listen to this. I like this whole thing.
I like your life.
Well, it's mine and you can't have it.
I love that whole interaction when she's pulling the beers out of the fridge and she's just like, well, it's my life, you can't have it. And he's just completely enthralled with this woman that he literally just met a few hours before. And again, V, like you said, that has happened, I think, in just about everybody's life.
Mm-hmm.
So it is now the morning after. David has left Sophia's apartment. As David's getting to his car, Julie Gianni pulls up, and the stalker vibes that he has been trying to avoid for the last 24 hours are starting to really show up terrifyingly because Cameron Diaz, man, I want to see her in more stuff like this. And this movie is 23 years old, and she's still pretty much only done comedy. Like, I've not seen Cameron Diaz in another role with, now, again, Cameron Diaz, another beautiful actress, similar to Penelope Cruz, but the way that she exudes obsession...
That she's...
is
a little bit hanging on by a thread, or there's just this...
Well, again, he's stringing her along completely.
Oh, well, that's a good analogy then. But it seems like you're walking on broken glass around her at this point, right? And you have to be super careful. You could just see the whites of her eyes. That's the problem.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, for sure. So she pulls up and she starts asking him questions about what he was just doing. Julie Gianni convinces him to take a ride with her, and in his arrogance, thinking that nothing can go wrong in my life because now I have met very likely the woman of my dreams, I'll get in the car, and that is just a big fucking mistake for David Ames. In this whole sequence, this is when Cameron Diaz gets even worse, even more terrifying. She starts asking him what he thinks happiness is, if he loves her, how many times they had sex just a couple of nights ago. She's telling him that 4 times means that his body... Well, you know what? Why not? How about we let Julie Gianni say these words here?
This is 24 hours a day. I live with this aching possibility that you might call me to do something.
Yeah, let's go to your house and we'll talk this out. I want to see where you live. Let's just slow down. I want you to stop the car, Julie. I want you to stop the car!
Don't you know that when you sleep with someone, your body makes a promise whether you do or not?
So now, if you haven't seen this movie, you can, I imagine, feel just how desperate and angry and obsessive Julie Gianni's character really is towards David Ames. Very unfortunately, the rest of this car ride does not go well. She ends up driving off a cliff into Central Park, destroying the car, and she ends up being killed, but David Ames goes into a coma. So David ends up waking up from this coma. His face is severely disfigured. He's lost most of the use in one of his arms. And for the rest of the movie, we are with David while he tries to navigate this new exterior, trying to reconnect with Sophia after it's been several weeks of him in a coma. And it starts to become this really intense psychological thriller of what's real and what's not. And I have loved this movie since I saw it in 2002. I did not see this movie in theaters. It came out in 2001, like I mentioned. I was still not really allowed to go see a lot of R-rated movies at the time. But I remember my father watching this movie, and he said that it was one of the best movies he had seen in the last few years. My parents are big Tom Cruise fans. My mom does not like this movie. But when my dad told me he liked it, I gave it a shot. I fell in love with it. I've introduced so many people to this movie. And very unfortunately, a lot of those people have not liked the movie because it is disturbing, it's traumatic, it's intense, and it really makes you think. And not that people don't like to think during a movie, but there's a lot of thinking that you kind of have to put yourself through to get through the movie. So I love it. V, I know it's been, a decade plus since you saw it, so I'm curious what it was like for you to revisit Vanilla Sky.
I'm so glad you picked this movie because I've been meaning to revisit it for several years now, actually. I watched it a couple years after it came out. I was only like 19 when I saw it. I was by myself, so I was in college by that time. So it's been nearly 20 years since I've seen this movie.
Yeah.
And so watching it for the podcast this week, I'd forgotten most of it.
Oh, wonderful.
And I loved being able to watch it with fresh eyes as an adult. I'd only ever remembered the car crash scene because it is so traumatic and intense. And I gotta say, this movie is really good for how uncomfortable it makes me. And it
fucking A, right?
And I always love being able to watch Tom Cruise in an against type role like this one.
Yes, definitely. Oh, yeah.
The beginning of this movie is great. The end of this movie is fantastic and redeemed itself for me. The middle of the movie, I think it's about 10 minutes too long.
Oh, interesting. Really, when I was watching this time, I was like, "Is there anything?" And I know I seem to be the one that doesn't think some movies need to be cut shorter. And while watching it this time, I did start to think about it. I was like, "Do we need some of what's going on in like the hour 20 to hour 50 minute? You know,
Yeah.
like that 30 minutes." And I was like, "Yeah, you know what? I think I need it." And I was thinking about that about a movie I just watched the other day. I was like, "Do we need?" Yeah, I think we do. You know, it lands a little bit easier for some other people. And, you know, I like the slow burns. I like the long, you know, movies. So and I know you do too, but I understand what you mean. I just don't think I would cut anything out of this movie. I think it's not a perfect movie by any means, but it is so damn good that I just don't think I'd want to lose anything. And there's actually an international cut with 5 extra minutes.
Jesus.
And I have not seen it, but I've got to. I have to.
I think it's because after this traumatic event, and then David is starting to rebuild his life, and then a couple other things happen, which we're not going to talk about because we don't spoil.
Exactly.
But this movie becomes, like you said, a psychological thriller with an unreliable narrator. And once that happens, and as an audience member, you realize that there are some crazy things going on that you do not fully understand yet.
Right. See, I like that about movies like this.
I do too.
Yeah, yeah.
But once
it's like
you
similar
realize
to The Fountain,
that,
there are moments, you know, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, wait a minute.
but the fountain moves along at a pretty good clip because in Vanilla Sky, once you realize that there's this unreliable narrator, but then there's like 40 minutes before the movie starts coming to its conclusion and actually comes over the hump of, okay, now we're getting into the third act, and the third act is fantastic, and it just comes together so amazingly, and I was just blown away the other night watching this film because in the middle I was just like, oh, this is kind of slogging. Am I not liking this movie? And then last 20, 30, actually it's a good solid 30, 35 minutes of the movie at the end where I was just like, oh my God, this redeemed itself. This movie is fantastic.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, and of course the movie opens with him driving a kit car, but it's a Ferrari 250 GTO kit car.
Oh, it's a hot car for sure.
Gorgeous car. And of course there's a scene of Tom Cruise running because there has to be.
It's so funny when I was watching, I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is definitely a Tom Cruise movie. He's running.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that scene. I did not say anything about it yet, but I'm going to.
Oh, good. Okay. And the supporting actors in this movie are fantastic. So many people showed up and I was like, holy shit, they're in this movie.
Yes.
There's some big names, especially have become big names that I was really excited to see in this film. And one of the things that he says in the beginning when he's acting all arrogant and he's beautiful and everything like that, he says, you're a person who believes secretly that you will be the one person in the history of man who would live forever. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Everybody thinks that. It's so funny.
I know. I think that way too often.
It's a universal truth for a lot of us, I think.
It's crazy.
And also another actor in this movie was actually in another Tom Cruise movie that we've already discussed, which I'm excited for you to touch on in a little bit. But yeah, overall, I'm really happy I revisited this film. I probably won't watch it very often in the future. I'd probably only watch this a couple more times in my life. But it does not... and that's just because it makes me really uncomfortable.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Wildly unsettled through most of this movie. And
I get it. I totally do.
That's the whole point, right?
Yes.
But I'm stoked that you picked it. I'm really glad we can recommend it to people. And there are a lot of friends and family members that I think would actually really enjoy this film.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. Like I said, I watched it in 2002, I think, and I bought the DVD pretty much right away. So it's been in my collection for the last 23 years. And there is no 4K of it yet. Hopefully there will be one soon, so I can watch the international version. The international version actually has an extra 5 minutes towards the end of the movie. And it's not like, an extra line or anything like that, but I read out what it is, and I have to see it. Like I'll tell you when we're not recording.
Okay, great, because...
so we don't spoil anything for anybody.
Yes, exactly. But if it's an extra 5 minutes towards the end of the film, I actually might totally be on board with it, because I thought you were going to say, oh yeah, it's like 5 minutes throughout the movie. I'm like, God, this movie doesn't need to be longer. But the conclusion of this film's so good that I could see another 5 minutes of it and be happy.
Yep, it's the extra 5 minutes are in the last 25 minutes of the movie, and what I read was like, oh snap, I gotta see this. So yeah, glad that you had a great time revisiting it. I, again, like I mentioned before, have not watched this movie in a handful of years, but when I first got it on DVD, I probably watched it 2 or 3 times a year because it was one of those movies that just really got into my head, and I am the type of person that loves these types of movies. And like you said, V, there's an unreliable narrator, so I'm a big fan of movies like that, as you know, and I'm sure our audience at this point knows as well. So this was a really fun revisit. This was I gotta be honest, I think this might have been my first revisit in my 30s. So it was a real interesting rewatch. And again, I love it. I think not only is the acting absolutely stellar by everybody. I mean, when Kurt Russell, I completely forgot Kurt Russell was in this movie, and I heard his voice. I was like, I know. Oh shit, it's Kurt Russell. He's awesome in this movie. Michael Shannon shows up. He's in one of his early roles. Noah Taylor shows up at one point, who was in Edge of Tomorrow, who I'm a big fan of. Penelope Cruz, Cameron Diaz, and Jason Lee knocks it out of the park, and in the maybe 20 minutes of the entire 2.5 hours that he's in this movie. Just a wonderfully put together cast and movie. And the crazy thing about this movie is they shot it in 6 weeks. They did 6-day weeks to shoot this movie because right around the time this went into production, there was a pending strike. And when production wrapped on this movie, the strike never happened. So I wonder if they didn't need to crush through this movie in 6 weeks with 6 days of shooting, how long the production schedule would have been, because it's all practical locations. There's almost no sets built. His apartment is definitely on a soundstage, but everything else is basically practical locations, except for the last couple minutes of the movie. That's very likely not where they are, and but it's very convincing. Yeah, I cannot praise this movie enough. And, a lot of people, especially the originators of a story that is being redone or reimagined, don't normally like it. But Alejandro Amenabar was completely in love with Cameron Crowe's take on his original movie.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, he was very proud of it. He thought that it was done respectfully. He liked that Cameron Crowe actually went a little bit more in-depth than Abre los Ojos does. And again, Penelope Cruz is in Abre los Ojos and in Vanilla Sky, so she shows up in both, the original and the reimagining. And in the beginning of this movie, with the whole open your eyes on the CD player, that always creeped me out when I first saw this movie. But, and again, open your eyes is the actual translation of Abre los Ojos. So there's a lot of nods to the original, and I thought that was great, that Cameron Crowe respected the original enough to bring it to an American audience. Just an all-around fantastic time at the movies. I would have loved to have seen this in the theater.
I wonder if Penelope Cruz plays the same character.
She does.
Movies.
She plays Sophia. Yeah, she plays the same character.
Wouldn't it have been a total trip if she plays the version of Julie in the Spanish version?
Oh, that would have been crazy. Yeah, and then they gave her the different role. That would be wild. Now, there's the opening sequence of this movie. V, I'm sure you very clearly remember, and I'm sure the audience that has seen Vanilla Sky remember, where Tom Cruise is running through Times Square completely empty.
I couldn't wait for this trivia.
I love it. It's similar to 28 Days Later, which we discussed when they shut down all of London for Jim, Cillian Murphy, to walk around to an empty, deserted London. On a Sunday morning in November, they got permission to shut down all of those back alleys and streets, and they shot that practically. That is all 100% the morning of November on a Sunday, which is just completely... I remember seeing it in the trailer and being like, what the fuck? There's no way they shot that without people showing up.
Yeah.
But they sure as hell did, and just absolutely impressive.
The one time I'd love to be in Times Square, nobody was in it.
I know, right? I'm a big fan of Times Square, but I can understand. And again, this does date the movie a little bit. 2001, the Virgin Megastore was still there. The Disney Store was still there. And this was actually during the Bush and Gore election. So on the NASDAQ screen, they had a lot of that playing, but Cameron Crowe was able to get that screen changed because of the movie and because the city of New York was all about getting this movie done. And the Dakota, which is the building that David Ames lives in, was the building that John Lennon lived in and was killed outside of.
Whoa.
Yeah, so the opening aerial shot of the building was actually done without a permit, with a helicopter, real quick. Another reason why his apartment is actually built on a soundstage is because the residents of the Dakota have never allowed any production crews inside that building to shoot.
That makes sense given the exploitive nature of that incident,
definitely.
right?
Completely.
But now it's so funny because nowadays you could just take a drone and shoot
I know, right?
whatever you wanted to. You don't have to take a big ass helicopter up there.
Yeah, the drone thing is pretty wild. There's so many stolen shots nowadays because you can just literally throw a drone up there. There's one cameo in this movie. V, I'm sure you recognized him at David Ames' birthday party.
Yeah, it was Steven Spielberg.
Steven Spielberg, the man. Yep, they were just about to shoot Minority Report right after shooting Vanilla Sky, so that's why Steven Spielberg shows up for that little brief cameo, and he calls him son of a bitch. I love that. It's so great.
I will always be heartbroken that you got Minority Report on your list before I could.
Yeah, that was one of the very first movies I put on the list of movies because I was like, I'll never forget the first time I watched Minority Report in the movie theater.
Oh,
I have not watched that movie
blown.
in, gosh, it's been a while. I'm so excited to revisit it. It is an absolutely mind-blowing movie. Tom Cruise was so happy with this movie. Now, granted, Tom Cruise and Cameron Crowe worked together before. Jerry Maguire, right? A few years before this movie. I've only seen Jerry Maguire once, but I remember liking it, and I've been wanting to revisit it, but every time I go to watch it, it's like a 2-hour-plus movie. I'm like, I'll go for that in the future. So one day I will revisit it, but I do remember liking it a lot, and Cuba Gooding Jr. was great. Everybody was great.
Although in the early 2000s, Renee Zellweger was kind of all over, and so
yes.
I just got a little bit tired of her.
Sure, I can understand
and
that.
Nothing
Yeah, it was
gets
Bridget
her,
Jones' Diary.
Of course. Yeah.
Jerry Maguire, The Bachelor with Chris O'Donnell.
I mean,
and,
it probably doesn't help
that
I don't think she's a very good actress, personally.
No, it probably doesn't. No. I'm kind of on board with you. I've never been like, oh. Now, granted, I love Cold Mountain. I thought she was great in Cold Mountain. But when we realized who Renee Zellweger won over at the Oscars that year, I was a little bit disappointed for sure. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Vanilla Sky. Tom Cruise, during the press tour of Vanilla Sky, they went all over the world. I watched the special features of it. It's about a 15-minute video of them going to Korea, Australia, Paris, Mexico, Canada, cities across the United States. And at every one of them, Tom Cruise said that now, this was in 2021. I don't know if he still feels this way, but at the time, he said that this was one of the best movies that he's ever acted in.
I could see that, although I think his performance in Born on the 4th of July was better.
I was going to say, I knew you were going to say that because I agree with you.
However, I do think this is one of his top 3 performances.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's not, it's not a Top Gun scenario. It's not a Now, granted, this could be in the genre of science fiction. I would say Vanilla Sky can be, it teeters on science fiction and definitely psychological thriller. Mm-hmm. But overall, it's weird to say, as an adult actor for Tom Cruise, mm-hmm. this is definitely, this and Born on the 4th of July are like 2 movies that I would be like, those are his crowning achievements. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would throw Collateral into that discussion too.
Ooh, oh, hell yeah. That's on my list also.
It's also, yeah.
Yes, that's so funny when we realized how much of Tom Cruise fans you and I were when we were like birthing the podcast. I was like, my God, I actually fucking love Tom Cruise.
It's the biggest surprise of this podcast was that realization. It wasn't like
so many people give him shit, They're just like, because of his whole Scientology belief, I get it. Again, we are the type of people that can separate church and state, right? We can separate Scientology and film.
That was a really good pun.
So, yeah, Tom Cruise, he will have my heart for a very long time, and probably for, the rest of his career. I can't wait for Dead Reckoning Part 2. I know you still have your reservations of Part 1, which I keep telling you got to rewatch, but I am a big fan of Tom Cruise and just about everything he's been in, except for The Mummy. I did not like The Mummy.
Well, that's because the movie sucked.
Yeah, never finished it. It might be one of the only Tom Cruise movies that I've never finished.
Yeah, I finished the movie. It does not get better.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay. Now, one thing I did want to point out, it's a little brief, but it does allude to the title of the movie and a lot of the imagery in this movie. When he and Sophia are looking at paintings in his apartment, inside his apartment, because he's so rich, he has a separate apartment on the top level of his apartment, which would be so fucking amazing. No, it's not.
He's
it's
kind
awesome.
of a douche
really cool.
in the beginning of this movie. Come on.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I'm not saying he's not, but I just love the fact that he has this second apartment that he can go to.
I'm just stoked that I now can have a home office and I don't have to work out of my bedroom anymore.
Oh, believe me, I have a theater room now, and yeah, it's been one thing I've wanted for I don't know how long. So he's showing Sophia paintings. One's by Joni Mitchell and one's by Monet. The painting that Monet did was actually done in 1873, and that's where we get the Vanilla Sky title from and the imagery, especially when things are starting to get a little weird in the movie, and the sky looks very vanilla. I've actually been to Monet's house in the countryside of France many, many years ago. Yeah, in 2001, my parents and I and my sister, we went over to London, and then after a week in London, we went over to France, actually Paris, and we spent about 6 days there, and one of the things my mom absolutely had to do was go to Monet's house, see where the man lived, and I was too young to not appreciate it at the time, but at the same time, I was like, this is kind of cool being somewhere where a lot of paintings that I've seen at museums were done, So I thought that was pretty cool that there was a true Monet reference in this movie. Now, granted, I don't think the painting is actually a Monet. It could be a replica.
It's probably Tom's.
I was going to say, yeah, you never know. Maybe it is actually the real Monet, because he does mention, this is a real Monet. Who knows?
The movie came out in 2001, and that's when you saw Monet's residence in 2001. That's a cool connection.
Yep. That actually is. Well, look at that. You put that together before I could. Yeah, it was really neat. My parents really had a good time there, and I have pictures, somewhere from being there. It was pretty neat.
Real pictures, because we still used film back then.
Yeah. Throwaway cameras, wind-up cameras, all that kind of stuff. In this movie, there are 428 pop culture references.
Whoa!
Which is nuts. Now, they're not all listed. I couldn't find all of them, but there's a lot of Paul McCartney references, Bob Dylan references, Radiohead references. There's a Bjork reference in this movie. Sigur Rós, which is a very popular Icelandic band, is used in the soundtrack of this movie, which I am a major Sigur Rós fan and a Bjork fan. I've seen both of them in concert, and Bjork is still one of the most incredible live concerts I've ever been to in my entire life. And Sigur Rós put on a pretty good show. It was at the Hollywood Bowl, and the sound was a little to be desired. And the lead singer of Sigur Rós actually apologized because he was very upset with how the sound was coming out at the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh, especially because that's not his fault.
No, it definitely is not, but, it happens. If the lead singer of a band mentions it, then you know something's definitely wrong, because that actually happened at a death metal show I was at not too long ago. The lead singer was like, sorry, guys, the sound sucks tonight. And I was like, it actually sounds kind of good to me, but hey, whatever. I was having a good time.
With those references, then, did you ever find out whose guitar that was? And it had a little plaque. I just couldn't see whose name that was.
Yes, that is actually a Pete Townsend of The Who's guitar.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, because they were notorious for destroying their instruments on stage.
Yes.
I've never been a massive Who fan. I respect them for who they are, similar to like the Eagles and even the Beatles. Hey! Yeah, I just never really got into him. But Paul McCartney actually did write the title song for this movie.
That I remember.
Vanilla Sky.
Yeah, I do remember that because I remember the Oscars and him being nominated. But I am a big fan of Baba O'Reilly, the Who song. So
okay. I couldn't tell you any names of any Who songs.
Oh, it's the one with the crazy, awesome keyboard intro.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Now, Kurt Russell was actually not the first choice to play Curtis McCabe, the therapist that David Ames is actually talking to throughout the movie. Michael Keaton, Harrison Ford, and Alec Baldwin were all in consideration to play Curtis McCabe.
I could see Michael Keaton.
I could too. Definitely not Harrison Ford.
No.
I think he's a little too hard.
He doesn't... I know this sounds horrible, but he doesn't portray empathy very well.
Right, exactly. Yeah, fully agreed. Cameron Crowe and Tom Cruise actually tried to get a very famous director that you and I have done a double feature of here on Movies You Miss podcast to make a cameo. He declined, but it still would have been awesome to see him, and it's awesome that they tried to get him. Billy Wilder was actually approached to make a cameo in this movie. I wonder if it was the moment that Steven Spielberg took, or if it was going to be like a Spielberg-Billy Wilder like double cameo, which would have been pretty sweet.
I'm just stoked that after this movie he cut his hair for Minority Report.
Yeah, right?
It was the early 2000s and Tom Cruise's long hair phase.
Yes. This film came out 9 years before your pick this week, V, which is pretty sweet. We'll get into that shortly. And this movie actually is very similar to We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, which ended up being Total Recall, the Philip K. Dick story. I watched Total Recall literally right after watching Vanilla Sky, and I was like, oh my gosh, there are so many similarities to both of these movies. Mm-hmm. And Total Recall holds up. I have the 4K. It's fucking awesome.
Including a crazy blonde.
Including a crazy blonde, Sharon Stone, yeah. Man, she was hot.
And that exercise, the tennis outfit.
Oh, hell yeah. This movie ended up coming out on December 10th of 2001. The budget was $68 million.
That is pretty good, actually.
Yeah, I kind of thought it would have been a little bit more, especially with Tom Cruise, Cameron Diaz,
I figured it would have been an $85 million movie.
Yeah, for sure. But $68 million did it. The domestic box office was $100.6, and the worldwide box office was $203.3 million.
That's great.
So this movie was, very successful. This
Wait,
came out.
so this movie cost $10 million a week to make.
Ah, look at that. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, because $68 million over a 6-week period. Yeah, during 6-day work weeks, that's intense. I've done the year 2001, so many freaking times here. I'll just list off the ones that I've done for those that may not remember. I did Atlantis, Serendipity, Waking Life, How High, Black Hawk Down, A Knight's Tale, and V's favorite pick of mine, Monkey Bone.
Oh, God.
And the highest grossing
No longer
films
the worst, though, so there's that.
That's true, yeah. Hamlet 2 took the top spot for worst picks of mine so far. Mm-hmm. And I'll just run through the top 10 of 2001 because there are also great movies, even though I've done it on those other episodes. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone was number 1. Shrek was number 2. Monsters Incorporated was number 3. Rush Hour 2 was number 4. The Mummy Returns was number 5. Pearl Harbor was number 6. Jurassic Park 3, number 7. Planet of the Apes, the Tim Burton version, was number 8. Hannibal was number 9. And number 10 was Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring.
I've only forgotten that Hannibal was number 9, and it's so disappointing that it actually would crack the top 10 because that movie is garbage.
It really, really is. So that is the top 10, and I do like to tell everybody where my pick of the week landed. It landed in the 35th highest-grossing spot of 2001, scratching the top 50, Vanilla Sky. If you want to check it out, you can rent it on MGM Plus or Paramount Plus, Prime Video, or Apple TV. It is definitely worth your time. If you are curious, give it a shot. So I think it's time, V, to segue over into your much lighter pick of the week.
We can exhale now. Relax a bit.
Take a nice deep breath.
And see Cameron Diaz in a whole different light now.
Exactly.
Because I've picked the 2010 very underrated action comedy starring, of course, Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz.
Yeah.
This is called Night and Day.
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
I'm so glad you're a fan of this movie, too.
I saw this in theaters and loved it immediately.
Same! Yeah. And
awesome.
I was so sad that so many people did not go see it. And it was during a weird time where Tom Cruise wasn't as popular as he is right now. And so he wasn't a box office guarantee. But that's okay, because that's the whole point of our podcast, is to introduce people to underrated films. So, and this movie actually focuses a little bit more on Cameron Diaz than Tom Cruise, which is pretty cool.
Yes, definitely.
She's definitely in my movie for a lot longer than yours.
Yes, she is.
Cameron Diaz plays June Havens. We get introduced to her in Kansas City, of all places, in a junkyard, which she definitely seems like the girl next door, but it is somewhat hard to picture her at a junkyard or working on cars.
A little bit. Yeah, nothing against her.
Nothing against her, but she actually, in this movie, her name is, like I said, June Havens. She inherited her father's classic car restoration shop, which is a really cool business. I'm certainly supportive of that. And so she's in Kansas City actually looking for some car parts. She's at a pick and pull yard, basically, is what that is.
Oh, yeah.
She finds what she needs and throws it in her bag and then gets to the airport because she needs to fly back for her little sister's dress fitting for her wedding dress. And this is where she literally bumps into Tom Cruise. His name is Roy Miller. Immediately, which of course everybody would do, she is taken aback by the fact that Roy Miller, Tom Cruise of all people, who is quite good looking, has run into her and been very charming and smiled at her and had a little chit chat. And they get through security and seem to part ways, but as they're walking to their respective gates, they actually run into each other again. And it turns out that they're on the same flight back to Boston. Oh my God, Boston again!
Yeah, Boston again.
Ben Affleck, call us.
Yeah, right?
And everything seems to go according to plan, but at the last moment at the gate, the attendant tells June that the flight is all full and booked up. It's actually overbooked, and she cannot get on it. And she makes us think about it a little bit, but interestingly enough, Roy Miller says, hey, you know what? These things happen for a reason. Nice meeting you. And he walks onto the plane. But June actually gives a bit of a sob story saying, and she does a little bit of an exaggeration saying, my sister's wedding is tomorrow. I have to go back. And it turns out she's able to convince the gate attendant to let her on the plane. And when she gets on the plane, she's a bit confused because the plane is basically empty. It's not overbooked at all.
Yep.
And this is when Tom Cruise starts to look a little concerned and goes, wow, no, why is she on this plane? So something's going on that we don't quite know of yet. And so now June is on the plane, and she and Roy continue to get to know each other, or just at least talk and just make a little bit of light conversation. And at one point they hit a little bit of turbulence and she spills her drink on herself. So she excuses herself to the bathroom. And this is when shit hits the fan. Because
in more ways than one.
In more ways than one, because the remaining people on the plane start trying to kill Roy Miller. And Roy Miller, it's Tom Cruise, he immediately displays all of his awesome skills that he has, because he's defending himself left, right, and center, kicking some ass, dodging not only bullets but also tranq darts.
Oh, yeah.
But what's different about this action than most other Tom Cruise action movies is that he has a lot of really funny quips throughout fighting all these guys.
Oh, hell yeah.
At one point, a guy throws a knife, and Roy blocks it with a seat cushion, and it goes almost to his crotch, and he goes, hey, not cool. It's just stuff like that. It's just such a lighter action movie than you usually expect from Tom Cruise, especially with his Mission Impossible movies.
Definitely.
And Juna, of course, still is getting ready in the bathroom and trying to spruce up a little bit so she can flirt with Roy Miller. And she's like, what are you going to do? And I just love how this little pep talk goes.
So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're just going to let this opportunity pass you by? No, of course you're not. You're going to walk right through that door. You're going to get right up on this. Not your first rodeo, woman.
When she exits the bathroom, everything seems to be calm again. She doesn't notice anything's wrong. And Roy is sitting there with a fresh drink for her, drinks for both of them, in fact. And they start talking again, and he mentions how he needs to go. And she's like, well, where are you going? He's, well, we've lost the pilot, I have to tell you.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, where did he go? And Roy goes, well, he's dead.
Listen, there's no need to panic. I have contained the situation.
Situation?
Yeah, we've lost the pilots.
Where did they go?
I mean, they're dead.
The pilots are dead.
Shot.
Shot. By who?
Me. Actually, I shot the first pilot. He shot the second pilot accidentally. He's just one of those things.
Of course, how ridiculous does that sound? So June is laughing about this, but all of a sudden the plane starts to list a little bit. And she goes, oh, shit. And Roy actually does try to land the plane. And I love this part of the movie, actually, that this is a consistent character trait throughout the movie. June is a normal person.
Yep.
And we are quickly finding out that Roy is basically a secret agent.
Yes.
June reacts the way a normal person would throughout this movie.
Completely. Yeah.
And I absolutely love that about her character. Is she's being so reasonable when she's flipping out going, what the hell is going on?
Oh, hell yeah. I love it. It's so fucking funny.
And that's what she does after Roy crash lands this plane. This is when he tells her a little bit about who he is. I'm a secret agent. All these guys on the plane were trying to kill me. They're going to come visit you and ask you about me, and they're going to try to dip you. And she's like, well, what's that?
No, I feel a little weird.
Oh, yeah, that'll pass once you fall asleep. We should be in a couple of minutes.
What?
I need you to listen, June.
Did you drug me?
Yes.
You drugged me.
Yeah, it's for your own good. Now, look, these bad people who are going to come and see you, they're going to ask you about me, okay? And you need to tell them you don't know me. June?
Okay.
You need to tell them you don't remember anything. And you need to avoid getting in any vehicle with them at all costs.
Wait. Where are they?
Well, they're serious people, June. They'll probably identify themselves as federal agents, and they'll BIP you.
Dip me? And what?
Disinformation protocol. They'll tell you a story about me, about how I'm mentally unstable, paranoid, how I'm violent and dangerous. It'll all sound very convincing.
I'm already convinced.
And this is the moment where Roy knocks out June with a sleeping agent.
Yeah.
She wakes up the next morning in her bed and is like, oh God, thank God this was a dream. But there are little clues in her house that in fact this was not a dream. This really happened. And she gets a knock on her door by her ex named Rodney, who's a firefighter.
Oh, yeah.
and he's played by Mark Blucas. For anyone who's seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer, he plays Riley in season 4, Buffy's boyfriend. My most hated season. That season is so boring, and Riley is the most vanilla toast character in that whole series. He sucks. And so it's so funny that he's playing a really similar character in this movie because he's so lame in Night and Day too.
Oh, yeah. He's a little bit. He's
a goober.
Definitely. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I promised myself if you made it through that airplane crash that I'd come over and ask you out to dinner. Like, okay, buddy.
And then the way he's eating pie, he's just, oh, God, he's so lame. And so Rodney...
Well, he plays the character well.
He does play the character well. And Rodney takes June out for pie, actually, and wants to talk to her about how they broke up and they shouldn't have. And lo and behold, Roy shows up and tells June, hey, it's probably best if we stick together. And she's telling Rodney, this is the guy I'm telling you about.
Yeah.
It's a great scene, and one of the things that he does is he handcuffs June to get her out of the restaurant because she's not listening, and grabs her and holds a gun to her head, and he goes off on this crazy ass tirade about pies for everyone. Pies. Abe Lincoln knew it. He knew it, and they killed him for it. And if anybody follows me, I'm going to kill myself and then her. And they get and they get into the car, and he goes, and of course he is immediately back to normal. Goes, okay, there were security cameras in there, and so the agency will know that you're actually my prisoner. You're not going willingly, and they'll get off your tail, basically. So he's doing this all for her. And this is the point where Roy actually starts to tell June really what's going on. And it turns out he is, in fact, a secret agent, and he was protecting an asset named Simon, played by Paul Dano. He's this genius kid who has invented a battery that basically is perpetual energy. And of course, that is something that a lot of people would want. And unfortunately, their facility in Kansas City, which is how they ran into each other, was raided the week before, and he and Simon escaped. And unfortunately, June has been drawn into this espionage scheme, and a lot of dangerous people are now involved. And Roy insists that they stay together to protect June. And so for the rest of the movie, Roy is trying to prove that Simon is in fact in danger to the spy community and also protect June, while terrorist groups and a whole bunch of other horrible people are trying to not only get Simon, but also get Roy and June.
Yeah.
And there are a couple reasons why I love this movie. First of all, I really love Cameron Diaz in this role. She did great. Oh, yeah. And this turn of Tom Cruise being so much more lighthearted than he normally is in action movies was just a breath of fresh air for me.
Oh, yeah.
And he plays comedy really well.
Yeah, well, we've all seen Tropic Thunder, so yeah, we can understand.
Yes, that's a very good point. And I'm so glad you enjoyed this movie too, but would love to hear about your most recent revisit this week for the podcast, and also when the last time you watched it was.
Oh yeah, for sure. I saw this in theaters when it came out, and I loved it. I went with a buddy of mine. We went like on a middle of the week afternoon sort of situation, had a really good time. Laughed a lot. I mean, how can you not? Like you said, Cruise is great. Cameron Diaz is awesome. Skarsgård is great. Viola Davis is awesome. The action's a lot of fun. It's not like over the top ridiculous. Like some of it seems like it could potentially happen. Now, granted, who knows how often somebody's going to shoot one person, and that person that just gets shot's going to shoot the person that they shouldn't be shooting. Going back to the pilot thing.
But the
it's
way
hilarious.
They filmed it, it seems like it could have happened. Like it definitely.
Oh yeah, no, there's a lot of natural action that feels like it's totally going down the way that it probably would in real life.
The physicality made it very believable for sure.
Yeah. And it's been one of those movies that ever since I saw it in theaters, I was like, I could own it, but I never have. My most recent view was great. I will say, though, that I forgot that this was on your list because about 5 months ago, Amy and I watched it.
Oh.
And yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, Night and Day. I haven't seen that movie in I don't know how long. So Amy and I watched it. From what I remember, Amy had a good time. And that was the more recent viewing up until just the other day when I watched it for the podcast. So I remembered a little bit more this time around for the podcast than I had when I watched it the time before this. But again, I think I've seen this 3 or 4 times now. I haven't watched it a whole lot. Again, I love the action. I love Tom Cruise in it. Cameron Diaz is great. Direction's awesome. The director is, I'll let you reveal who that is. I've done a movie with him before. He's coming out with a new movie very recently, which I don't know if I'm going to see. It's the Bob Dylan story with Timothée Chalamet. I don't know if I'm going to see that or not. I'm not a big Bob Dylan Nolan fan.
Or Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah, I don't mind him as much as I did
you liked
several
him in
years
Dune?
ago. I love Dune. Yeah, I thought Wonka was a lot better than it was going to be. And of course, he's in Interstellar. But overall, I give the movie like a B+. You know, like
Nice.
it's a lot of fun. It's light, and it's definitely one of those afternoon movies that, you know, if there's nothing that you really feel like watching, this could be something, you know, to just put on maybe while you're playing, you know, your Nintendo Switch, which my wife does a lot when I watch movies, or again, yeah, just an all-around fun movie, and I'm glad that you picked it for the podcast. It's definitely an interesting pairing, but at the same time, like you said, it's a perfect palate cleanser after my pick of this week, and I hope that our audience, if they haven't seen it, definitely checks it out.
I agree, and a palate cleanser, I think, is the best description. If you've had a hard week at work, this is a perfect movie for you because, like you said, it's light, it's fun, but because of the action, you kind of feel energized afterwards.
Oh, for sure.
And so it's a really good pick-me-up film. I watch it, I would say, every year or two.
All right.
And it'll always, it's one of those movies that if somebody like my dad or my sister was like, hey, you want to watch Night and Day? I'd be like, hell yeah, let's put it on, right? It's
I'm
you're
never
always
gonna
going to
turn
say
it
yes.
down.
Right, exactly. No matter how long it's been since you watched it last. And
Right.
And one of the quotes, like I said, this movie is actually kind of motivating and energizing. At the very beginning of the movie, when June and Roy are talking on the airplane, June says, someday I'm going to go on this trip. And I really love Roy's response to this.
Someday. It's a dangerous word.
Dangerous.
This is really just code for never.
So yes, it's a great fun film. It's definitely acceptable for teenagers because it's PG-13 and
it's a very light PG-13.
Yeah,
now, granted,
there's
it
very little
merits.
Well, there's a lot of violence, very little blood, actually.
Yeah, it merits PG-13. It's almost like one of those video games where there's no, like you said, there's no blood. It's, you know,
Awesome
it's
car
pretty much
chases,
people,
though.
Yeah, people get shot and there's no any, you know, exploding guts or anything like that. And I going back to the whole plane crash sequence, I love when she finally wakes up and the dead people start falling out of the seats and she walks up to the cockpit and he's like, "Hey, June, come on in, sit down." Like, you know, it's like, "Oh yeah, we're on a road trip right now. Come on in, sit down."
Just so nonchalant about everything.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. But that, you know, it's also kind of cool, like thinking about it now, like while watching the movie, I didn't really put it together until really just talking about it. He's keeping an even keel for her because she's so new to everything that's going on. And he doesn't want to be like a James Bond type, which he is, but he doesn't want to be like, let's go, you know, like just so wooden about it. He's very much like bringing humanity to his role.
Like in the car chase, he's like, "Is that the bridesmaid dress? You look great, June."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, it's so out of control, hilarious. And then, of course, you know, after the plane crash, he hands her the little bottle of tequila. And she drinks it down, but then, of course, it's not just a bottle of tequila.
No, it's not. And that's a really good point that I actually hadn't put together either. And I'm sure you're right that he is being lighthearted so she can come down from freaking out because during the first gunfight and they're hiding behind that pallet and he goes, "Okay, on 3," and he goes 1, and then she runs out.
Yeah.
And totally loses it. And he's like, June, come back. And she's like, "I'm sorry, I freaked out." He goes, "What number would you like to go on?" And she's like,
right.
"No, 3 is good. 3 is good."
3 is good.
And
it's very smartly written for sure.
Well, the crazy thing is that's actually a nod to the original Mission Impossible.
Oh, is it really? The one with Tom Cruise?
Yeah. The very first one. Sorry, the very first movie with Tom Cruise in it.
Oh, okay.
One of the great set pieces and one of the greatest set pieces in an action movie that I've seen ever is when he's in the restaurant with Kittredge at the beginning of the movie.
Oh, hell yeah. Definitely.
And the fish tank blows up.
Yes.
That was a practical stunt because, of course, it was with Tom.
Yeah.
Right?
Hell yeah.
And there's this story that Tom was talking to the stunt coordinator, asking him, "When do I go?"
Oh, okay.
Right? The pyro is going to go off, the fish tank is going to explode, and I need to start running. So when do I go? And the stunt coordinator says, "You go on 3." And Tom is like, "Okay." So everybody gets set up, and the stunt coordinator goes, 3, 2, and Tom's like, wait.
No.
And Tom's like, "Wait, stop. I thought you said go on 3. And the stunt coordinator goes, "Yeah." So Tom goes,
"Oh.
Do I go on 1 or do I go on 3? And the stunt coordinator goes, "I don't know."
Gee, that sounds exactly like a film set.
It does. And so,
Whenever you're comfortable.
And so June freaking out and going on one and talking about
That's
when do I
great.
go is a nod to the original Mission Impossible movie.
That's awesome.
That
Man,
is-
he really likes to drop a lot of Easter eggs from his real production
he
life. It's so
does,
awesome.
And that is, I think, my favorite piece of trivia from this movie.
That is freaking awesome.
So that is Night and Day. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. We even get a cameo from Gal Gadot in this movie.
Yes. Oh my gosh. When she showed up this time, I recognized her. I don't think I did the first time.
I didn't either.
Well, obviously not the first time I saw the movie, but when I watched it a few months back, I don't think I put it together.
Oh, okay. When I watched this movie in theaters, she had just been in Fast and Furious, like a year or two before.
Okay. Alrighty.
But I didn't really remember her from that. So when I was watching it in the theater, I was like, "Oh, there's the hot chick from Fast and Furious." Like, what? You know, she hadn't been in enough for me to really recognize her.
Right. Wonder Woman hadn't even been
No,
conceived
and
yet.
Fast 5 hadn't come out, and that's when she has a bigger role. And
Right.
and now watching it, I oftentimes forget, because like I said, I watch this every year or two, and
Sure.
oftentimes I forget that she makes a cameo in the movie, and I'm like, oh shit,
Yeah.
that's right, Gal Gadot.
I like that. I was sitting here and I was like, is that is all right.
And it's,
Yeah,
it's
I
a
like Gal
perfect
Gadot.
role for her too.
Oh yeah. She's awesome.
She is. And since it's Tom Cruise, we also get a stunt of him running on a rooftop, which is lots of fun.
Of course. And I recognized Cameron Diaz's sister in the movie, but I don't IMDb your movie, so I couldn't fully place her, but she looked really familiar.
She should, because that's Maggie Grace.
Okay, Maggie Grace, I know the name.
She was a really annoying character in Lost. She did a great job. She was
Oh.
supposed to be annoying.
Okay, I never saw Lost.
She was in The Hurricane Heist, which is covered by How Did This Get
Oh.
Made in an episode.
Oh, I haven't listened to that one, and I haven't seen that
Oh,
movie.
God, that's a good episode. They shit all over that movie.
All right, I'm going to have to listen to that one. I just listened to the striptease episode, and that one was
Oh,
amazing.
God. But you probably recognize her from the Taken movies because she plays Liam Neeson's daughter.
Okay, there it is. She's got blonde hair in this one, and in Taken, she's got brunette hair.
Yes.
So that's what I think definitely threw me off the most.
And
Like, I know the face, I know the eyes, I just can't place her from anything.
and
Well, that's cool.
Famke Janssen is her mom in those movies.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, that's Maggie Grace.
Sweet.
They were cast really well because they do seem they look like sisters.
They really do.
Yeah. Tom Cruise, I figured we talk about him enough on this show. I'm not going to go through any of his credits. We all know who
Are
he
you sure?
is. Yeah.
Okay.
But Cameron Diaz, unfortunately, she's decided to stop acting. Cameron Diaz has been in a previous pick of yours, one of my now favorite Christmas movies, The Holiday.
Hell yes.
She also is the voice of Fiona in Shrek.
Yeah.
And she's going to be in probably a couple other picks of ours because, of course, she was in The Mask, and that's where you and I were introduced to her.
Oh, yes, indeed. I will never forget that reveal as a kid. I actually had a poster of Cameron Diaz on my wall when I was in junior high.
As you
and
should
it was,
have.
Yeah, it wasn't her in the red dress from The Mask, but it was around that time. She had the
Nice.
longer hair. Yeah, it wasn't the
Charlie's
shoulder length like in
Angels.
Charlie's Angels.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't that.
No, yeah, because she cut her hair in
okay.
Charlie's Angels.
Yeah, right.
So not only are you, I'm sure The Mask is one of your picks in the future,
You're damn right.
but also she's in this Ashton Kutcher film, What Happens in Vegas, which you and I both love.
Very funny flick.
And she's also in Bad Teacher, which I'll probably pick at some point.
Bad Teacher's pretty damn funny, too.
Again, like we talked about, she does mostly comedies.
Yeah. I liked her in The Sweetest Thing. I thought that was pretty funny also.
The Other Woman, that movie's hilarious.
The Other Woman, yeah, I watched some of that with Amy. I never actually did see that from beginning to end, but what I saw was pretty funny. Her and Leslie Mann were great together.
I love Leslie Mann.
Yeah. And, we can't forget it. I liked the first Charlie's Angels with her and Drew Barrymore and Lucy Liu. I didn't like the second one very
love
much,
Lucy Liu.
Oh, I'm a big Lucy Liu fan
Yeah.
also.
Even though I thought it was kind of campy and cheesy, especially when it was released originally. But yeah, I like the intention and girl power and everything about Charlie's Angels. And Peter Sarsgaard plays one of Roy's fellow agents.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys who, when you see him, you recognize him. You're like, yeah, God,
Yep.
he's in a lot that we've seen. And it's true.
Oh, yeah.
He more recently was in The Batman.
Yes.
He played D.A. Coulson. He also was in this great mini-series called Dope Sick.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
Oh,
one.
it's a true story about the opioid epidemic and how this one pharma family knew how addictive they were and pushed it anyway. And it'll infuriate you, but it's
Oh, wow.
really important to watch. Highly recommend it.
All right.
He also is in a horrible Ryan Reynolds superhero movie. He's in The Green Lantern.
Is he?
He plays the bad guy in The Green Lantern.
Oh, wow. I don't remember much of the Green Lantern.
He's in a ton of Jake Gyllenhaal movies because, in fact, in real life, he's married to Maggie Gyllenhaal.
That's right. Yeah.
So he's in most of Jake Gyllenhaal's movies, including Presumed Innocent, which is a recent miniseries as well.
I want to watch that one. It just came out.
Yeah, it was pretty good. My sister liked the book,
right.
too.
Oh, sweet.
He's also in Jarhead, an older Jake Gyllenhaal movie.
That's right. I've seen Jarhead once. I don't remember much of it.
Yeah, I only saw it once, too. Maybe I was too young for it, but...
Maybe.
He's also in a terrible remake.
Oh, yeah?
He's in the Leonardo DiCaprio version of The Man in the Iron Mask.
Oh, all right. I never saw that one.
Oh, it's awful.
I've heard it's really bad.
Only watch the Richard Chamberlain, The Man in the Iron Mask. That's fantastic.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
He's also in a Harrison Ford movie, K-19, The Widowmaker.
Yeah, great movie.
Yes, he plays a Russian...
Catherine Bigelow.
Yeah, and he plays a Russian seaman in that movie. He's very good. So yeah, that's Peter Sarsgaard. You'd totally recognize him if you watch this film.
He's in a future pick of mine, A Garden State, as well.
Yeah, I didn't want to mention it because I know it's a future pick of yours, but I'm excited to see it. Okay, thanks.
He's also in a pretty good kind of horror movie, but not super scary movie with Kate Hudson called The Skeleton Key. That's pretty awesome. It'll probably be on the list in the future.
Okay, cool. And then one of the bad guys, he's an arms dealer. His name is Antonio in this movie. The actor's name is Jordi Mola, or Moya. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing your last name.
Okay.
Did you recognize him at all?
Oh, definitely. I was just going to wait for you to drop a couple of the movies.
Me, Johnny Tapia.
Yeah, there he is. Bad Boys, Bad Boys. Bad Boys number 2. Told you I'd get it in again.
I love it. Keep doing it. Yes. He is the bad guy in Bad Boys 2. He's such a creep in that film, and
oh yeah,
he's a little bit more cleaned up in this one.
Yeah, he is. He actually, not that he's not a handsome guy in Bad Boys 2, but he's definitely a straight shooter in this one.
Yeah, because he's just so sweaty and greasy in Bad Boys 2. He seems like
Yeah,
he's doing his
exactly.
own product all the time.
Right. He's also in one of my favorite Ron Howard movies starring Chris Hemsworth called In the Heart of the Sea, but he's got a very small part in it.
Oh, okay. I'll look out for him when we do that film because I know it's on your list.
Yes, it's coming up.
Viola Davis once again plays the head of a spy agency in this movie.
Hell yeah, she does.
Good go-to role for her.
Yeah, she's always awesome and delivers.
Yes, she does, and she just has such a great air of authority.
Hell yeah.
I actually talked about her a couple months ago because she stars in Prisoners.
Hell yeah.
She's one of the moms of the girls who were taken.
I've still got to see that movie Widows that she's in.
Me too.
Supposed to be a badass movie.
No,
I
it's
have
on my
not
list.
gotten to it.
Mm-hmm, same. She's just great in everything she does. Doubt, which we can't stop talking about anyone who's in that film because it's so good.
Yeah, that's a heavy one too.
She's in Law Abiding Citizen, The Help.
Yeah. She
also plays director Amanda Waller in Suicide Squad and other DC movies because, again, director of a spy agency. She's great at it. Well, and you loved her in The Woman King.
Oh, hell yeah. Phenomenal flick. That is a very underrated. I got to throw that on the list. I don't think anybody saw that movie.
Yeah, definitely do that. And she also plays Michael Jordan's mom in Air.
That's right.
She's awesome. She's great in everything she's done that we've seen her in.
She really is. She was great in her maybe minute and a half scene in Traffic, too, from 1997.
She was, yeah. And Paul Dano, who was also in Prisoners, funny enough.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Plays Simon the Genius in Night and Day. He also was in The Batman.
Oh, hell yeah, he was.
He and Peter Sarsgaard have had 4 movies together.
No shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was in another pick of mine, Looper, from episode 54. Can you believe it was that long ago already?
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty wild.
And another pick of mine from even earlier because he's Klitz in The Girl Next Door.
That's right.
He's so good in that one. And most recently, he's in Dumb Money.
Oh, yeah. Dumb Money's good.
Yes. I'm so glad you ended up watching it.
Yeah, me too.
And as you said, we are big fans of the director of this film.
Yeah.
It's James Mangold.
Yes.
He has a really good filmography.
He really does.
He did an underrated Sylvester Stallone movie called Copland, which, as most of you know, I'm not a fan of Sly's, but Copland is a really good film. Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro, Michael Rappaport. There's a bunch of really great actors.
Oh,
yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. James Mangold also directed Girl Interrupted, Kate and Leopold, which Viola Davis has a small role in.
Yeah, she does.
Identity, which you've recommended.
Yeah, Identity's badass.
Walk the Line, which you should watch again.
I should watch again.
The remake of 3:10 to Yuma, which is very good. He also directed The Wolverine, which is the one where Wolverine goes to Japan. It's not a good film, but...
Oh, interesting. I never saw that one.
No, it's not good. But he went on to direct Logan, so...
Yeah.
Wolverine Redemption.
Yes, definitely.
More recently, he directed Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Oh, that's right, yeah, which was a good one.
And your pick of our racing episode, Ford versus Ferrari.
Oh, hell yeah. Such a great movie.
It is. So James Mangold, I'm speaking of B+, I mean, his filmography is pretty solid.
Absolutely.
However, Tom Cruise was not originally slated to star in this film.
Oh, really?
Chris Tucker, Adam Sandler,
Whoa.
and Gerard Butler, which I could totally see, were
Oh, hell yeah.
all considered for the lead role of Roy Miller.
I could see Chris Tucker doing it. I think he would have a good time doing
I
it.
think he'd be too silly.
I could agree with you on that too, but Gerard Butler, that would have been
Perfect.
pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Who was the other one?
Adam Sandler.
Oh, yeah, no.
Could he run up and down a plane and do martial arts moves? No.
I don't know. He's never done it, so I don't think it's something that anybody could see him doing. But he might be able to do it. I don't know.
When Chris Tucker was in the starring role, Eva Mendes was cast as June Havens.
Oh, okay. That's
could
cool.
have been an interesting pairing.
Yeah, that would have been pretty fun.
But again, Chris Tucker's too silly.
Yeah.
But Tom Cruise wanted to do another spy thriller. He looked at Salt, which then was changed. The screenplay was changed, and Angelina Jolie starred in it because they changed the lead character to a woman.
Okay.
And The Tourist, which also stars Angelina Jolie,
interesting.
ended up going to Johnny Depp.
Yeah. I never saw either of those.
Oh, I've seen both. The Tourist is better. Both are like C+ movies.
Oh, okay. I heard nothing but terrible things about The Tourist, so that's
Most
interesting.
people hate it. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. Paul Bettany's in it, and he's good.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
However, he thought both Salt and The Tourist were way too similar to Mission Impossible, so he declined them.
Ah.
And because of that, he ultimately chose this project because of its comedic elements, because it was different enough from Mission Impossible.
Awesome.
Yeah. And surprising to absolutely no one, with the exception of Roy jumping off a rooftop at one point in Austria, Tom Cruise did most of the running and jumping in this film, all of the footwork stunts without any wires.
Yeah, it's too badass. It's so fucking cool.
So that is Night and Day. I'm so glad you're a fan of it. It came out in 2010. It had a budget. Guess how much the budget of this film was?
Okay, I will guess a budget of $115 million.
Oh my God. You are the one who needs to play this game all the time because you're always getting it right the few times.
Oh, did I get it right?
$117 million.
Oh, wow. I was close.
Yeah,
all right.
Extremely close.
Damn.
Unfortunately, in the United States, it only grossed $76 million.
Ah, damn. That
but
sucks.
Tom Cruise is big internationally.
Yeah.
The worldwide gross was $262 million.
Whoa. Wow.
So
All
it
right.
ended up doing fine.
Definitely.
But that's why this movie, Night and Day, is actually considered a bit underrated in the United States.
I would agree with that.
So if any of you want to give it a chance or rewatch it again, you can stream it on HBO.
Awesome, which was how I watched it.
Great. Well, that is Night and Day. Cannot look at Cameron Diaz the same after watching Vanilla Sky. Like I said, I'm so glad that I watched Night and Day first because seeing her pair up with Tom Cruise again, I don't think I could have gotten that car ride out of my head for most of Night and Day if I had done it in that order. So I think I'm going to wait to watch Night and Day again for a bit of time because of Vanilla Sky.
Yeah. Just need to take a little break.
Yeah. Cameron Diaz did a great job at Crazy.
Yes, she did.
So, speaking of Vanilla Sky, would you watch it with your grandma?
No, I don't think I'd watch Vanilla Sky with my grandmother. I don't think she would enjoy it.
Really? She doesn't like...
I don't think so.
She liked the messed up movies.
She did, yeah, but more horror and like vampire, like I've said it in the past. Like, psychological stuff wasn't always my grandma's bag, but so I don't think so.
Okay. I really think my mother would like Vanilla Sky.
Oh, well, maybe Susan, you should check it out and let us know what you think.
Yeah, because it has that psychological element that she's actually a fan of.
All right, perfect. Yeah, Susan, check it out. V, would you watch Night and Day with your grandma? I'd watch it with mine.
Oh, totally. Yeah, you can watch
Yeah.
this with anyone. My sister Shannon's a big fan of it. I think my dad is too. I've recommended it to a bunch of people just because it's it's an action comedy. How can you not love it?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And they have great chemistry together. I mean, despite
They do.
the craziness in Vanilla Sky that happens between the two of them, they are really good together. I love the scene on the beach with them.
Oh,
And
yeah.
there are just so many little conversations and quips between the two of them. Yeah, I think they play off each other so well, and so I think it was really good casting in the end for this movie.
I completely agree.
Well, all right, that wraps up our Tom Cruise, Cameron Diaz discussion.
Oh, yeah. That was a fun one.
Polar opposite movies. I really enjoyed doing that.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Well, we have one more week before our month of horror.
Yeah.
John, do you want to tell everyone what we're doing before we dive into the creepy crawly scariness that is Halloween month?
I'm down for that. We're going to do romantic comedies just to lighten the load a little bit between this episode, even though there was light and not so much lightness going on. This one will be light before, like you just said, the creepy intensity of which the first week of our Halloween month will bring. I can't wait to get into that one. But before we do that, we're going to go romantic comedy style. I chose a movie from 1993 starring Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, Rita Wilson, Victor Garber, and Bill Pullman. This film is written by Jeff Arch, David S. Ward, and Nora Ephron, directed by Nora Ephron. This will now be my second Nora Ephron film. This is the classic Sleepless in Seattle. And if you've not seen this movie, it's fantastic. You can follow along with us and rent it on Amazon Prime. I will watch my DVD copy. And V, what did you pick for next week's romantic comedy?
Well, first of all, I'm really excited to watch Sleepless in Seattle because I've only seen it once, and I believe I was 11.
Oh my gosh,
So
wow.
I don't remember this movie at all, really.
Oh, wow. I used to watch Sleepless in Seattle all the time. It was a movie that my family and I watched quite often.
I love Nora Ephron, so I'm sure I'll enjoy it. And of course, it's Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. Classic, right?
Yeah, indeed.
And because of that, I also chose a classic comedy. Kurt Russell is going to be next week's episode as well because this movie is from 1987. It stars Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn. It was filmed near where I grew up. I
cool.
very often pass the locations for several scenes in this film and think about it every single time I do. This is the hilarious Overboard.
Yeah, I have not seen Overboard in probably 10 or 15 years, so this will be a fun revisit also.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Well, you can watch it either on Tubi or if you have an Amazon Prime subscription.
Perfect.
Well, I'm really looking forward to that. As we always say, we need to do more rom-coms on this show, so I'm glad we're dedicating a week to it, especially before the horror month that we're doing. Even though I am really excited about it, I get more excited every single year we do it.
Yeah. I'm starting out with a doozy. I can't wait.
Yeah, so I hope you all join us for that. Even if you're not fans of horror movies, that's okay, because not only am I kind of a layman watching these horror movies so you can get my perspective, but also, since we don't spoil movies, we're not going to scare you with our conversation.
No, we're not.
So looking forward to that, but until then, thank you all so much for joining us this week. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast, and follow us on all social media. We love having conversations with you. Shoot us some questions if you want, or if you're ever curious about any other details about a movie or have follow-up questions based on our conversation, we're more than happy to answer them. So please feel free to reach out at MoviesUnisPod, and that is also our email address at gmail.com as well. And as always, we love to end this podcast with film as a form of art, and in art, every opinion is valid, except if you think
we need trigger warnings before movies start in the movie theater.
While I do agree with putting trigger warnings before TV shows or miniseries, it's because we don't have a standardized rating system for those. Really? Right. I mean, TVMA is kind of a catch-all.
A little bit these days.
We have the MPAA for a reason in movies.
Yeah.
Rated R.
Exactly.
Right? And you can look up why it's rated R specifically if you really wanted to.
Yep. Which you never used to be able to. You literally could not find the reasons why movies were R-rated.
True.
Graphic violence and, sex scenes, language. Mm-hmm. Now it's before every trailer, it's on every poster, and it's on IMDb, and you can literally find, you can spoil the movie for yourself if you want to, and you can find out what's in these movies.
I really appreciate that rating system because then I know if there is a sex scene in the movie, I'm not going to watch that film with my parents. So I really appreciate that.
For sure.
R for graphic sex. Oh, well, skipping that one.
Graphic nudity.
Yeah. R for intense violence or extreme weather. Cool. We can watch that
Exactly.
film. But on TV shows, I actually kind of understand why they would put a trigger warning until they have a standardized rating system.
I can get behind that. I just don't need to see a trigger warning before an R-rated movie starts. in the
No,
movie
I
theater.
agree with you. Yeah,
That was very off-putting.
I think that makes sense. I think the only other time you should have a trigger warning in a movie is when there's intense strobing lights for people with like epilepsy and stuff like that. And I see that a lot on Disney movies because, of course, Disney movies are bright and have strobing lights all the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Cool. I'm
All
curious what
right.
our audience will think about that.
Me too. Let us know if you think there's a really good reason for trigger warnings before a movie.
All right.
Well, thanks everyone again. Hope you tune in next week. We really appreciate all of you joining us. And until next time, bye-bye.
Cheers, everybody.